So now we're going to do the opposite. Okay. In example 1, you were given information about theta and had to find function values of 2 theta. And now we're going to have to find function values of theta given information about 2 theta. Okay, so it's kind of the opposite. All right, let's see how this works in example 2. It says find the values of the 6 trigonometric functions of theta given that the cosine of 2 theta is equal to negative 5/12 and theta is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. All right, so there's this angle theta, and then there's this other angle 2 times theta. We know that theta, not 2 theta, theta is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. So that tells us that theta is in quadrant 2. Okay, that's what that tells us. And then we have a piece of information about the cosine of 2 theta. Okay, we know the cosine of 2 theta is negative 5/12. Okay, from those 2 pieces of yellow information, we have to compute the 6 trigonometric functions of theta, meaning we have to find the sine of theta, the cosine of theta, the tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent of theta. Okay, all right, so let's get started. In part A, we are going to find the sine of theta. All right, so let's think about how we're going to do this. Okay, you've got to keep in mind, what you're trying to get and what you have to work with. Okay, we know information about the cosine of 2 theta. Okay, so I'm going to go back to page 1 and I'm going to look at my 3 formulas for the cosine of 2 theta. Okay, when I look at these, okay, remember the left side is always the cosine of 2 theta. Okay, I'm just replacing a with theta. And then the right side involves, sine or cosine, one or the other or both. Okay, we want the sine of theta. Okay, if you notice, formula number 3 only involves the sine of theta. Formula 3 relates the cosine of 2 theta to the sine of theta. Okay, so we're going to use this double angle formula and we're going to be able to get the value of the sine of theta. Okay, so I'm going to come back to where I was working. Okay, so that was on page 3. And I'm going to write down the double angle formula that I just saw, the double angle formula in number 3. Okay, so we said that the cosine of 2 theta is equal to 1 minus 2 times the sine squared of theta. Okay, again, why did I pick that? Because I know information about the cosine of 2 theta and I'm trying to get sine of theta. Okay, again, keep in mind what you're given and what you're looking for. Okay, all right, so let me kind of write this a little clearer. This means that the cosine of 2 theta is equal to 1 minus 2 times the sine of theta squared. Okay, sine squared theta means sine theta times sine theta. Okay, we are after sine theta. Okay, we know that the cosine of 2 theta is equal to negative 5/12. Okay, so we can go ahead and plug that in on the left side. Okay, so this has to equal 1 minus 2 times the sine of theta squared. Okay, and this is an equation that has one unknown. Okay, we're looking for the sine of theta. We're going to be able to get it by just solving the equation for the sine of theta. Okay, all right, so let's do this. The first thing I'm going to do is, I'm trying to isolate this blue piece. I'm going to get it alone. I'm going to start by subtracting 1 from both sides. Okay, so I'm continuing up here. We're going to get negative 5/12 minus 1. So negative 5/12 minus 1. And I'm going to go ahead and convert that to a fraction. Okay, so this is going to be negative 17/12. Negative 17/12. is equal to -2 times the sine of theta squared. Okay, you can write it as sine squared theta. That's what it is. But I'm just trying to make this clear to make sure you understand what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Again, we're after isolating the sine squared theta. Okay. So that sine of theta squared, sine squared theta, it is multiplied by a -2. So I'm going to have to divide both sides by -2. Okay. So now I'm going to get -17/12 times -1/2. Okay, so hang on, let me write this. My little stylus is acting crazy. So -17/12 times -1/2. Okay, the negative twos will cancel over here. Okay, this is going to leave me with the sine of theta squared. Okay, let's simplify this. On the left side, if you just multiply across the top and across the bottom, you're going to get 17/24. Okay, positive. That's equal to the sine of theta squared. We want the sine of theta. It's being squared, so to undo that, we have to take the square root. You do it to one side, you have to do to the other. Remember, if you have something squared equal to a number, when you're taking the square root of just the number, you need to put a plus or minus out front. Okay, so on the right, the sine and the sine squared, or the sine and the sine, the square root and the square cancel, leaving you with the sine of theta. Sorry about this stylus acting crazy. I'll fix it for the next video. So we're going to get sine of theta. Okay, and then on the right, we're going to have plus or minus the square root of 17/24. We do have to pick the sign. It matters if this thing is positive or if it's negative. Okay, it can't be both. Okay, so let's go talk about this. Okay, if we're going to go back up here, okay, how can we figure this out? Well, we know that theta, remember, we're finding the sine of theta, not 2 theta. Okay, the sine, or sorry, theta is in quadrant 2. We said that earlier. Okay, I just jogged your memory by highlighting it in green. Theta is in quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, sine is positive. Okay, so we need to pick the positive version. Okay, so I'm going to put right here, pick positive, because theta is in quadrant 2. Okay, all right, so I'm going to come over here. Okay, I'm going to kind of clean this up now that I know the answer. Okay, the sine of theta is the positive square root of 17/24. Okay, I'm going to try to simplify this. This is going to be the square root of 17 over the square root of 24. Okay, I can rationalize the denominator by multiplying top and bottom by the square root of 24. Okay, so in the numerator, we're going to get, well, let's do it this way. We're going to get square root of 17 times the square root of 24. If you simplify that, that is going to be 2 times the square root of 6. Okay, the denominator will just be 24. Square root of 24 times the square root of 24 is 24. Okay, and so this is going to leave us with 2 times, we can combine the 17 and the 6. If we multiply those guys together, we're going to get 102. Okay, so 2 times the square root of 102 divided by 24. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 24 12 times, and so this whole thing becomes the square root of 102 divided by 12. So yay, we are done. Okay, I'm going to write this equals sine of theta. Okay, and then I'll box it. Okay. All right. So that was a workout. We still have 5 more trigonometric functions of theta to compute. Okay, so let's go to the next page and work on the cosine of theta. Okay. All right. So for cosine of theta, okay, again, we need to figure this out based on what we already have at our disposal. So if I go back to the problem and I read what I was given, okay, I know theta is in quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, the cosine is going to be negative, so we should get a negative answer. We are given information about the cosine of 2 theta. We know what that value is. We also, now after part A, we know the value of the sine of theta. Okay, so we do have some information to work with. I'm going to revisit the double angle formulas. Okay, since I know something about the cosine of 2 theta, I'm just going to do what I did for the sine of theta. Look at these equations and see if I can relate the cosine of 2 theta to the cosine of theta. Okay, if that's possible. Okay, it is. Okay, and actually, well, okay, no, looking at the wrong thing. It is possible we can use this one right here. Okay, we could do that. We could use number 3. Oh, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. We're going to use this one, okay, because this relates the cosine of 2a to the cosine of a. Okay, if I'm translating this into theta language, this will relate the cosine of 2 theta to the cosine of theta. All right, so we're going to use formula 4 here. So it's going to be very similar to getting the sine of theta. We're just using a different double angle formula here. Okay. All right, so let's go write this information down. Okay, so here we go. I know the cosine of 2 theta is going to be equal to 2 times the cosine squared of theta minus 1. Okay. All right, so we can go ahead and plug in for the cosine of 2 theta that was given to us. So that's one of those quantities in yellow. The cosine of 2 theta is equal to negative 5/12. Okay, so that's going to be the left side. This has got to equal 2 times the cosine of theta squared minus 1. Okay, we're trying to solve for the cosine of theta. Okay, so just like we did in part A, we've got to isolate this trig piece. Okay, so to isolate it, I'm first going to add 1 to both sides. Okay, this is going to give me negative 5/12 plus 12 over 12. All right, is equal to 2 times the cosine of theta squared. The ones will cancel. All right, so I'm going to get, let's see, negative 5/12 plus 12 over 12. That's going to give me 7/12. That's got to equal 2 times the cosine of theta squared. Okay, we want this thing. Okay, remember the square is attached to the cosine of theta. It's cosine squared theta. Okay, so that is being multiplied by 2, so we can undo that by dividing by 2. Okay, so the left side is going to be 7/12. Remember, if you're dividing by 2, it's the same as multiplying by a half. The 2's will cancel on the right. We will be left with the cosine of theta squared, that quantity squared. This is the same thing as cosine squared of theta. All right, so if we simplify the fraction here, this is going to be 7 over 24. Okay, that's equal to the cosine of theta squared. We want the cosine of theta, but it's being squared, so to undo that, we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, got to put the plus or minus out front. Okay, the square and the square root will cancel, and you'll get that the cosine of theta is plus or minus the square root of 7 over 24. Okay, again, you've got to pick. It can't be both positive and negative. Okay, so you've got to pick a sign. This is the cosine of theta. Okay, we said, I've got it highlighted in green, theta lives in quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, the cosine is negative, so you need to pick the negative version. Okay, so we're going to say that the cosine of theta is negative square root of 7 over 24. Okay, so we're essentially done. I am going to simplify this a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to come out to the side here. We know that the cosine of theta is negative square root of 7 over 24. That is negative square root of 7 over the square root of 24. We said that the square root of 24 is equivalent to 2 square root of 6. Okay, rationalize the denominator here. Multiply across the top and the bottom. We're going to get negative square root of 7 times square root of 6 is square root of 42. In the bottom, we're going to have 2 times 6, square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. Okay, so this whole thing becomes negative square root of 42 over 12. Okay, that is the value of the cosine of theta. Okay, all right, 4 more to go, and I will do those in the next video.